Welcome to No Church Answers, a weekly roundtable Bible discussion for men. We're not pastors, just regular guys talking about scriptures and their own spiritual journeys. And now, here's your host, Bill Cox.
And welcome, everybody. This is No Church Answers. My name is Bill Cox, and it's great coming to you and talking about issues and things that are challenging in the Christian walk. No better group of fellas to have to help us through this than the guys from Man Up, Spiritual Oasis for Men. This concept that we're going to be talking about today is like over my head. And so at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the group from Man Up. Start with, he is a former policy writer, that is a little bit over my head as well, and a current professional gambler, which is definitely over my head. He is the producer, Mr. Steve Titch.
Hey, Steve.
And we have a former prosecutor, a current attorney, we call him the judge. Michael Cropper is here.
Hey, guys.
And a big deal in talent development. Get those fingers down.
Is he doing that again?
That's right. He is a professional trainer, kind of the group theologian. We call him the professor, Robert Koshu.
Robert.
And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with our producer, Mr. Steve Titch, about fearful symmetry.
Well, let's get everybody. This is our 400 level.
I was going to say it maybe 6.
Telecast, maybe 6, but no, we'll try. We're gonna raise your boat so you're not flailing out there,
Right.
and we'll toss you a life server if you need one. We call it. We're going to look at the later sections of the Book of Job. This is what I call the other creation story. Did you give your kids, when they were toddlers, a Noah's Ark set? We had that, the little people doing it.
I'd have to think if we
but
did
you know,
or not,
you give
but,
generally
yeah.
we do. We certainly tell the stories. The wallpaper of the nursery is with nice
Right.
little animals.
True.
Of course, there is the peaceable kingdom imagery in Isaiah. In the book of Job, when after 39 chapters of discussing really why bad things happen, God appears, but we see a different creation. We see a chaotic creation. As you're going to read some sections, God is setting out the boundaries of the land. He's holding back the sea. He's pulling out whales with fish hooks. We get this awesome picture. And this, why we're calling this fearful symmetry, because William Blake, the poet, was a fan of the Book of Job, and it was inspired, if you remember the poem, The Tiger, Tiger, tiger burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? The end of the poem, which is somewhat of a contemplation on this creation of both the beauty but danger in it, ends with Blake asking rhetorically, did he who made the lamb make thee? With lamb capitalized, it's clearly a double entendre for Christ.
Right.
Did he who saved us make something that was so beautiful, yet would kill you if you approached it? So we're going to talk about this whole aspect of nature and randomness and chaos.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And especially here in Houston, where we deal with hurricanes, and in North Texas you're dealing with tornadoes, the utter awesomeness of nature, and how does it come from God?
Excellent, Judge.
I think is he supposed to present?
Oh, yeah, okay.
I
So,
apologize. Is that okay?
Go ahead, Professor.
Robert has a...
okay. So I always think of creation as 4 stages.
Thank you.
And this is kind of so stage 1, the perfect creation, God existed, and that's what the intention was from the beginning. Stage 2, creation after the fall, close to perfect creation, but now we've had some randomness, and I'm going to clear up randomness and chaos after we go through, entered into it because sin had entered and man had been banished. Stage of creation existed until the flood. Creation after the flood, so even more randomness comes in because the ecology is fundamentally altered after the flood. I think there is something there that we can't understand. The consequences of our sin has more and more impacts on creation. And this is actually the longest stage of creation because it's the stage we're in now. There is a fourth stage of creation that will come that it's talked about in Revelation and some in Ezekiel when God talks about, I'm going to build a new heaven and a new earth. And so that's kind of where I land on this. And so we'll get more into it. Mike?
All right, yeah. Let me, folks, I want to present to you just a couple statements regarding the magnitude of God, the power and display, and everything that Robert and Steve have so aptly presented to you. Last summer, I was fortunate enough to go scuba diving in Florida with my son and my youngest daughter. The oceans hold some of the most awe-inspiring beauty of the world. I think Bill will read a little bit about from the text if you can fit that in. The water in Florida is crystal clear, and we viewed many wonderful, marvelous, colorful corals and fish varieties which displayed a rainbow of colors that reflect like prisms of light. Some of the creatures are amazingly beautiful, but they are also deadly. We did not see any sharks. I'm going to set you at ease right off there. But we saw several stingrays of fairly large size. And as you remember, Steve from
Steve Irwin.
Steve Irwin,
Steve
yeah.
Irwin died from the point
stingray.
from a stingray. So we saw several of those. When my daughter and I were returning home, we were flying at night. During the flight, we saw a thunderstorm several miles away from our passenger jet, and we were flying at the same height at the top of the clouds. So I was able to record a video of the lightning leaping above the clouds. Now, to me, the light show was extremely dazzling, truly dazzling. However, I did not know the effect of the severe storm on the earth below. So the storm holds both beauty and danger at the same time, and a person on the ground may be struck by the lightning or may suffer from flood damage from the rain if it's overwhelming. The fact is that both of these are in God's plan. Both the ocean and the storm hold profound beauty and danger at the same time.
Excellent. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and read the scripture. And this is from Job. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed the limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. Do you give the horse its strength or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Do you make it leap like a locust, striking terror with its proud snorting? Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. Its sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. Can you pull a leviathan with a fish hook or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. This is No Church Answers. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Bill Cox, host of No Church Answers and director of Man Up, Spiritual Oasis for Men. We hope you enjoy our show as much as we enjoy doing it. But our ministry needs your support if we are to continue to bring our TV show, our podcast, our live shows to men seeking spiritual refreshment. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a patron of Man Up Spiritual Oasis. Get more details at our page on patreon.com. If you would like to support us directly, You can make a contribution through PayPal at donate@manupmedia.org. All contributions are tax deductible. We're not pastors, just regular guys, so whether you're successful or struggling, we hope to bring you the good news of God's saving grace as we share our own spiritual journeys. Please consider supporting Man Up and No Church Answers today. And welcome, everybody. This is No Church Answers. We are talking about fearful symmetry. And as I was reading through this scripture, I was just reminded of my absolute favorite pet on the farm when I was a kid. My grandmother passed away. My grandfather lived across the road. We were pig farmers. We bought my grandpa a dog. He was a timber shepherd, 3/4 German shepherd, 1/4 timber wolf. He was exactly what is described in here. A beautiful silver dog. He grew up to be about 80 pounds, and incredibly loyal, absolutely vicious if he had to be. And there were times when he was vicious. And that's the image that I get from the scriptures that we read.
This is really good. Thank you for that reading. And I disagree with Robert a little bit. I think we can interpret from the Bible that chaos and randomness was baked in at the start before the fall. And we could talk about that a little, but one of the things, and we can't, too bad we can't do it through the whole of the book of Job, but in the discourse between Job and his friends, among actually one of the things they tend to agree on or tend not to argue about is the idea that the wilderness is something bad. They both, when they talk about it, talk about, I don't want to be, or I'm in the wilderness right now, says Job, where I don't want to be. And the friends say, you don't want to be out in the wilderness. The idea of a man-made civilization, or in this case, it was pretty much agriculture and livestock raising, was good. Out there was bad. What we have here in part of this message from God is that out there is part of God's domain too. The wilderness is not an evil place. And he's saying to be very careful to men. What you construct is not necessarily good or definable as good, and what's outside your realm of control is evil or bad. There are elements of this universe that you will never conquer and that will be always dangerous to you, but the point is, it's under my control. It belongs to God. So I would say, and that randomness, and there is a difference between randomness and chaos.
Yeah, I actually have definitions.
Okay, but the idea that when a hurricane hits Houston and blows a house down, that is not the devil at work. That is God's world, and you're just living in it.
and I like that.
And at times dealing with it.
Yep.
Dealing with it with the natural world, which is certainly a part of God's creation. Professor.
So I'm going to throw the definitions a little bit on their end. If you think of randomness and chaos, you think of randomness is random things happen. Chaos is, oh my God, whatever. Okay, that is technically not true. Chaos, the world was created with chaos based on these definitions. Randomness enters after. So you have to flip the definition. So chaos is a dynamical systems whose apparently random states of disorder and irregularities are actually governed by underlying patterns and deterministic laws that are highly sensitive to initial conditions. So basically, chaos is what we think of as randomness in the world, but there is if A, then B. I think the world was set up that way. I think after the fall and then after creation, randomness enters in. Randomness defined as the apparent lack of pattern or predictability in events, a random sequence of events, symbols, or steps, often has no order and does not follow an intelligible pattern or combination.
I'm going to let Mike talk in a minute, but you see, I disagree. Talk about the whole idea of genetics.
Yeah.
Randomness, that's the way every individual is unique. To be frank, guy loves a girl, man loves a wife, they get together, they have babies, but all that reproduction is by chance. How those chromosomes, genes all come together, and they were designed that way. We know DNA, how it works.
I think they were designed to work so let me let's Mike go in, Mike. Go, Mike.
I don't think it was random. All right, yeah, real quick.
Nice.
Folks, my contention not all between whether or not things were random or chaotic at the beginning. However, I tend to agree with Steve, but my focus is this. Real quick, I want to explain to you what they've been covering if you didn't know this. The story of Job, there is many rumors or many thoughts and projected that Job was extremely patient and he didn't do anything wrong while he was going through all these trials which Satan caused, because Satan believed that if he put enough stress, pain, suffering on Job, that Job would curse God. You go back to the first of Job and you'll see this. And God said, try it. And he did. What happened at the end, which we're talking about, which is very interesting, and resulted in what another image of creation is that Job did in fact raise all sorts of issues, and God came to him and said, who are you to question me? And he explained his marvels, and he used his great power and his great force to show Job that Job had no idea what he was talking about and why he should even challenge God and his ways, right? Which is phenomenal, folks. We have no concept of why God makes our life the way it is. And it's very interesting that y'all brought up the randomness of genes whenever you have sex. But I think my personal faith is that God, in fact, did create us, and he has a path for us and a plan for us. And one other thing, real quick, I'll go back. We create all sorts of things, folks. Cars, airplanes, they all are beautiful when we see them in action. We drive to work, we fly airplanes, we ride jets to a far destination. When you look at them in the sky, they're just beautiful. But they do have their problems, they do have their dangers. And to me, all those are creations of God because he gave us the knowledge and the ability to form them.
You know, this scripture reminded me of something that happened to me when I was in the Navy, and it was called not following the chain of command. I took a class. I had to take this class for my third class, and the instructor was terrible, and they gave us an evaluation. So I wrote an evaluation on this guy, and nothing happened. And one of my subordinates went and took the class. The guy was terrible to him. So I went over his head 2 steps, okay? And
2 steps?
2 steps to make sure. And I got a dressing down just about like this. Who do you think you are? And there comes a moment in life that, yes, something might be important to you, but you might want to check yourself.
Yep.
And
get somebody else's opinion, by the way, Bill, right?
And let me clarify, because I want to go practical after this. So I agree with you. There is some. I think there was, based on my definitions, there is chaos because so you and your wife get together, you have a kid,
right?
The hair, the eye color, the how white or pale your. My wife is full blown Greek, and she does not tan; she burns only. That all gets determined, I think, based on what we would call chaos, and I think that would have happened no matter what. Where I think the randomness after the fall comes in is now you have a genetic disorder that causes a heart condition. I think those are the things that enters after the fall. in my definition, because I really want to go practical afterward, but I thought that would be a good.
I think there's a race for the ovaries. one who wins a race to determine
There actually is.
Everybody wonders why Mike's on here. I think we've answered that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take our break. This is No Church Answers. And we'll be right back. And welcome back. This is No Church Answers. I want to go to producer Steve Titch.
Well, I like Job, so I'm gonna just ask you guys to consider another point of view here, because you look at God giving Job a dressing down. He just was really mean to Job in this situation. Let the devil have his way with him, and then he's going to come and pile on after Job. Actually, Job doesn't know what's going on, but he really does make a good case as to why exactly is this happening to me. Yeah. So yes, it's firm. It is God. Even Job says earlier, and what am I going to do? If God appears, he's going to blow me away in the whirlwind. And yes, God appears and blows him away in the whirlwind. But you can look at also this whole passage, which we only read part of, in some ways, and here's a practical takeaway, an invitation to be part of the creative purpose of God. Maybe as a junior partner, but nonetheless to understand God's purpose. And kind of you can look at, the where were you when I laid the foundations as an admonishment, as where were you when I all did this? Or it could be a, where were you? We were all going to go see the new Avengers movie. Where were you? It was kind of a disappointment. And here's something we can take away, that we're being invited by God to participate in creation. And that calls for an understanding of it, a respect for it. Again, all the things we talked about, searching for what your role is, because everybody will have a different role. So I want to look at it as a way, not necessarily as a scolding or an admonishment, but a statement of both disappointment, authority, but also invitation.
Okay. Well, and I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is, and Mike brought this up very eloquently in his description of the thunderstorm, creation is a wonderful thing. We are called to work alongside of it. However, as Mike also noted, you have to have a healthy respect. There are things in God's creation that absolutely will kill you. I do think that came about the fall, but there are things there, but it is all created by God. And it is a beautiful thing. And I think one of the things we're called on, and this is where I'll get a little practical with it, we're called on as men to be a part of God's creation. It's ours to use. We were given dominion over the animals. It's ours to use. Now, I work for an oil company. Do I think my oil company should be responsible and contain our spills and limit our emissions? Yeah, absolutely we should, because it's a bad thing. Should we throw oil out completely and never use it and all live in the Stone Ages and burn fire? And I like cooking with fire, though. But no, absolutely not. There is a level of life we have come to live and things we have been able to do because of that technology that we have created with God's blessing that is part of his creation. So,
Bill? Michael Cropper.
Yes. Folks, addressing both of their points that Steve and Robert presented to you on creation and how God's power is at work, ask you a question. Does our earth look like the earth that God created in the beginning? No, I don't think it does, which is, I think, what Robert said regarding sin. Did God's perfect plan fall apart that he had for the earth? No, but it did take a sinful turn. And are we...
That's very nice.
Are we part of God's perfect plan? Yes, but the plan has been modified. Or no, he had to change it. So how is it different? Well, we've talked about this. The guys have talked about this. It's different because sin is in the world, and there were some modifications to address. And Satan saw to this when he approached Eve as a serpent, folks, and that changed the whole direction for the plan of God's plan for our lives. So what am I saying? We live on the earth, and sin is in it, and we are going to face both the beauty and the complexity, and the randomness, and the power that God has placed in the earth, because this is part of God's power. The storms, the oceans, the animals, everything in it, he put in it. So my suggestion to you, and my statement to you is takeaway, folks, is trust God. We may be randomly created, like you said, with the genes, but he does direct our path, folks. And when things don't look like they're going right, and when you look like things have just fallen apart, and you trust God that he will come back and he will show you the right path to take. Bill?
Deep, Mike. Steve Titch.
I'm going to end just to mix things up with a bit of a catch-22 here. And I really do randomness because, when you're wagering, when you're playing poker, a lot of your decisions come down to basically understanding probability.
I would say probability
versus randomness. But here's my catch-22 in God. God created randomness, but then we believe God can intercede. Is creation really random?
So that's an interesting thought.
That is a thought to leave our audience.
And I don't want to touch it, but I do want. I want to say two things, super quick. Number one, if you want to see how to have theological discussions in a good way, watch our podcast, because you notice Steve and I have disagreements, but we're not throwing our fin out, calling each other sinners and running out. Take a lesson from that. Number two, if you want to see what we really thought about creation, some of our very earliest podcast numbers 3 through 16, were actually on the creation story in Genesis. Go listen to those wherever you get your podcast. Because we actually dove deep in with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out a couple of points. Even the worst of storms pass. And
Yep.
we in the Houston area, we have certainly experienced some of the worst of storms and what Mother Nature has thrown to us. And so you have the opportunity to bring good to your surroundings in the worst of situations. And the way I think about this particular lesson that we've talked about, we are all stewards, but we still have free will. And I think that is what God has meant for us. And with that, my name is Bill Cox. This has been No Church Answers. Thanks so much for tuning in.
You've been watching No Church Answers, a weekly roundtable Bible discussion for men, a production of Man Up Spiritual Oasis. Want more? Check out the Man Up Spiritual Oasis for Men podcast, available wherever you download your podcast. And to learn more about us and how to support our ministry, visit our website at www.man-upspiritualoasis.com.